The blue glow of computer monitors cast shadows across her face as she leaned forward, her eyes narrowing at the spreadsheet before her. The office around her had fallen silent hours ago, but she remained, illuminated only by the harsh light of her screens, a solitary figure in the deserted landscape of cubicles and corner offices. The numbers told a story that no one else could see, a betrayal hidden in plain sight, buried beneath corporate jargon and polished presentations. She'd spent decades learning to be invisible, to speak only through data and evidence, to hide the scars both physical and emotional behind professionalism and quiet competence. But some truths demand to be spoken aloud. Outside, Chicago's winter wind howled between skyscrapers like a warning. In a penthouse across town, a man who had once photographed war zones now faced a different kind of battle, one fought with spreadsheets instead of bullets, but no less deadly. Neither knew that their separate paths were about to collide in ways that would awaken ghosts from 30 years past. Some fires are meant to destroy, others illuminate what's been hidden in darkness. The blue light of computer monitors cast shadows across Eleanor Morgan's face as she leaned forward, her reading glasses perched low on her nose. The office around her had fallen silent hours ago, but she remained, illuminated only by the harsh glow of her screens, a solitary figure in the deserted landscape of cubicles and corner offices at Horizon Media Group. Her left eye throbbed with the familiar ache that had been her constant companion since the accident 11 years ago. The doctors had done what they could, saving her vision but leaving her with permanent damage that manifested as pain after long hours of screen time. A small price to pay, they'd said, for not losing her sight completely. Eleanor Ellie, to the few who truly knew her, traced her finger across a column of numbers, stopping suddenly when she found it, the discrepancy that everyone else had missed. Her breath caught, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. It was the smile of someone who had discovered something important, something that could make a difference. But she also felt the familiar hesitation that followed, the pause that came from someone who had learned that being right didn't always mean being heard, especially not at 58, especially not in a company rapidly pivoting toward youth and digital transformation, especially not when Victoria Blackwell had already made up her mind. The numbers on the pharmaceutical campaign were wrong, not just slightly off, but fundamentally flawed in a way that could expose the company to significant legal liability. If Horizon ran this campaign as planned, they'd be misrepresenting the efficacy of North Star Pharmaceuticals' new arthritis medication to millions of aging Americans. Ellie saved her findings, encrypted the file with a password, and emailed it to herself, a habit from decades in corporate America where documentation could be your only protection. As she gathered her things, she glanced at the silver frame photo on her desk, Sarah at her medical school graduation, the two of them beaming with identical smiles, though Ellie's crow's feet were pronounced next to her daughter's smooth skin. "I'll make you proud tomorrow, kiddo," she whispered to the empty office, knowing that her 32-year-old daughter, now a resident physician in Boston, would appreciate the ethical stand she was about to take, even if the company didn't. The Chicago skyline glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows as Ellie made her way to the elevator. 24 floors below, the late April night was unseasonably cold, the kind of lingering Midwestern chill that reminded residents that winter never surrendered easily in the Windy City. As she drove her 10-year-old Volvo toward her modest Evanston home, snow flurries began dancing in her headlights. Her mind was still running calculations, still rehearsing how she would present her findings to the team tomorrow. To Victoria, whose perfect smile gleamed as brightly as her designer watch, and whose barely concealed contempt for the analog generation had become increasingly obvious since her promotion to marketing director last year. The first hint of trouble came as Ellie approached the curve near Loyola University. A sudden stab of pain shot through her left eye, more intense than usual, momentarily blurring her vision. She blinked hard, gripping the steering wheel tighter as the car drifted slightly toward the center line. Headlights appeared suddenly around the bend, blinding her good eye as well. Instinctively, she jerked the wheel right, too hard. The Volvo fishtailed on the slick road, spinning wildly toward the guardrail. Everything slowed down. In that moment of pure crisis, Ellie's mind became strangely calm. She remembered the defensive driving course she'd taken after the accident turned into the skid. Ease off the brake. The car slowed, almost recovered. But then the back end clipped the guardrail with a sickening crunch of metal. The impact spun the Volvo completely around before it came to rest, facing the wrong direction on the shoulder. Hazard lights automatically blinking in the darkness. Her heart pounded as she sat motionless, hands still clutching the wheel at 10 and 2, exactly as she'd been taught when learning to drive in 1973. She was okay. Shaken, but okay. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" A deep voice cut through the shock. A tall figure appeared at her window, tapping gently on the glass. Ellie lowered the window with trembling hands. The cold air rushed in, bringing her back to reality. I think I'm all right," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. The man crouched down to eye level. He was in his early 60s, with salt and pepper hair cut short in a style that suggested military background. His eyes were startlingly blue against weathered skin that had seen its share of sun. Not handsome in the conventional sense, but his face had character lines earned through experience rather than just age. "That was some quick thinking," he said, his voice carrying a slight Midwestern drawl. "Most people would have panicked completely. Mind if I check to make sure you're not injured?" Ellie nodded, still processing what had happened. The man opened her door and knelt beside it, removing a small flashlight from his pocket. "Follow the light with your eyes, please," he instructed with the confidence of someone used to taking charge in emergencies. "I was a medic in the Gulf. Old habits die hard." She followed his instructions, though her left eye protested at the light's movement. "Your left pupil's reacting a bit sluggishly," he observed. "Previous injury?" "Yes." 11 years ago. Photography accident. Something flickered across his face recognition. Perhaps, but disappeared just as quickly. "Let's get you off the road," he said, standing and offering his hand. "My truck's just up ahead. I can give you a lift home, and we can call a tow for your car." "That's very kind, but I should be able to drive. The car seems okay. Just cosmetic damage to the rear panel." He seemed about to argue, but then nodded. "All right, but let me follow you home to make sure you get there safely. These roads are treacherous tonight." As Ellie carefully maneuvered back onto the road, she watched the headlights of his pickup truck in her rearview mirror. There was something reassuring about his presence, something that made her feel protected in a way she hadn't since Daniel died 6 years ago. The thought came unbidden, surprising her with its intensity. The man followed her all the way to her driveway, waiting until she was safely inside before flashing his lights twice and driving away. It wasn't until she was removing her coat that she noticed a small object had fallen onto her passenger seat, a tarnished bronze medallion with an eagle emblem. She picked it up, turning it over to read the inscription, "Robert Sullivan, Desert Storm, 1991. Her rescuer hadn't introduced himself. She placed the medallion on her bedside table, making a mental note to find a way to return it. Sleep eluded her that night, her mind toggling between the pharmaceutical numbers and the mysterious Robert Sullivan. Around 3 a.m., she gave up and padded downstairs to brew a cup of chamomile tea, her mother's remedy for sleepless nights. The house felt particularly empty, the silence broken only by the occasional creak of settling wood and the distant hum of the refrigerator. She missed her mother's physical presence, though Marion Morgan still lived technically in a memory care facility 20 minutes away. Alzheimer's had stolen much of the vibrant, intelligent nurse who had raised Ellie alone after her father abandoned them. Now, at 83, Marion rarely recognized her only daughter, living primarily in memories of her younger days as an Army nurse. The irony wasn't lost on Ellie, her mother forgetting, while she remembered everything, including exactly what was wrong with Victoria's pharmaceutical campaign. The Horizon Media Group's headquarters dominated its section of Michigan Avenue, 45 stories of gleaming glass and steel that proclaimed its significance to the Chicago skyline. Founded in 1970, the company had evolved from a traditional advertising agency to a full-spectrum media solutions provider, though no one, including the original founder, could explain exactly what that meant in practical terms. Robert Sullivan Robb to his friends, of which there were increasingly few, stood at his office window on the top floor, watching the morning sun glint off Lake Michigan. He'd been there since 5:30 a.m., unable to sleep after the encounter with the woman in the Volvo the previous night. Something about her had seemed familiar, though he couldn't place it. Her calm under pressure, the intelligent eyes, the way she'd handled the skid with textbook precision, and that mention of a photography accident. His office door opened without a knock, and Sofia Martinez entered with the confident stride of someone who'd been managing his professional life for 15 years. "You're brooding again," she observed, placing a cup of black coffee on his desk. "Board meeting in 30 minutes, and Victoria's already circling like a shark who smells blood in the water." Robb turned from the window with a wry smile. "Good morning to you, too, Sofia." At 64, Sofia wore her age with defiance, her silver-streaked black hair pulled back in an elegant twist that emphasized her unwavering gaze. Though she carried no title beyond executive assistant, everyone at Horizon knew her power. No one reached Robb without Sofia's approval, and her evaluation was swift and rarely mistaken. "The Q1 numbers are worse than we expected," she continued, handing him a folder. "Down 18% year over year. The digital pivot isn't delivering as promised, and we're bleeding traditional clients faster than we're acquiring new ones." Robb sighed, taking a long sip of coffee before opening the folder. "The North Star campaign launches next week. That should help steady the ship." "About that," Sofia said, her tone shifting, "there might be an issue with the data. One of the analysts has flagged some discrepancies in the efficacy claims. Victoria's team verified everything months ago." It wasn't Victoria's team that found the problem. The implied criticism hung in the air between them. Robb had known Sofia long enough to recognize when she was holding back a stronger opinion. "Let me guess," he said. "It was someone from the traditional analytics department." Sofia nodded. "Eleanor Morgan. She's been with us for 9 years. Former photographer who retrained in data analysis after an accident. Meticulous work, rarely makes waves." Robb frowned, the name tugging at his memory. "Morgan. Was she involved in the Westridge campaign last year?" "She was the one who identified the demographic shift that saved it from complete failure?" "Yes, though Victoria took most of the credit." The conference room was already half full when Robb arrived. Executives in expensive suits clustered in their usual alliances. Victoria Blackwell commanded the center of attention, her tailored charcoal pantsuit emphasizing her slender frame, her silver blonde bob perfectly styled to frame sharp features that had been maintained through regular refreshers at Chicago's most exclusive medical spa. At 52, Victoria represented everything Robb had come to distrust about modern corporate culture: style over substance, self-promotion over team achievement, and a willingness to sacrifice long-term stability for short-term gains that looked good in quarterly reports. Yet the board loved her. In an industry increasingly dominated by digital natives, Victoria had reinvented herself as a transformation specialist, though her actual understanding of technology was questionable at best. As the room filled, Robb noticed a woman enter quietly and take a seat near the back. She was dressed in a well-made but obviously older navy blazer over a simple white blouse, her auburn hair threaded with silver and cut in a practical shoulder-length style. She clutched a folder tightly, her expression composed but determined. With a jolt, he recognized her from the previous night, the woman from the car accident, Eleanor Morgan. She glanced up, caught his eye, and froze momentarily in recognition before recovering her professional demeanor. Before he could acknowledge her, Victoria called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her practiced smile not quite reaching her eyes. "As we approach the launch of our most significant campaign of the year, I wanted to personally assure everyone that the North Star Pharmaceuticals rollout is on track to exceed expectations." She gestured to the presentation screen, where a slick video began playing actors in their 30s pretending to have arthritis, miraculously cured by North Star's new medication. The before and after sequences were compelling. The messaging clear: this drug would give aging Americans their lives back. Rob noticed Eleanor shifting uncomfortably in her seat, her knuckles white around her folder. The digital-first approach has allowed us to target key demographics with unprecedented precision, Victoria continued as the video ended. We expect to see significant ROI within the first. Excuse me? The voice from the back of the room was quiet but clear. All heads turned toward Eleanor. Ms. Morgan. Victoria's tone carried clear warning. Did you have a question that couldn't wait for the Q&A portion? Eleanor stood, her height taller than Rob had realized, giving her a presence that commanded attention, despite Victoria's obvious displeasure. I've identified a critical error in the efficacy data for the North Star campaign, she said, her voice growing steadier as she spoke. The statistical analysis supporting the 70% improvement claim is fundamentally flawed. A murmur ran through the room. Victoria's smile tightened dangerously. Perhaps you should stick to your traditional metrics. Eleanor, the digital team has thoroughly vetted. The digital team used a non-representative sample and then extrapolated using an algorithm that artificially inflated positive outcomes. Eleanor interrupted, opening her folder. I've run the numbers 3 different ways. The actual improvement rate is between 38 and 42%, still impressive, but nowhere near what we're claiming in the campaign. The room fell silent. Rob studied Eleanor with new interest. It took genuine courage to challenge Victoria so publicly, especially when the campaign was days away from launch and millions of dollars had already been committed. May I? Rob extended his hand for the folder. Eleanor hesitated only briefly before walking it to the head of the table. As she placed it before him, their eyes met. An understanding passed between them. She recognized him from the night before, just as he had recognized her. For 20 minutes, the room watched in stunned silence as Rob asked questions that validated Eleanor's concerns, his gaze never leaving her face as she explained the implications. For the first time in her professional life at Horizon, Eleanor felt the exhilaration of being truly heard, of having her expertise recognized without qualification or condescension. When she finished, the silence held new weight. Around the table, expressions had shifted from dismissal to concern, and in Victoria's case, to the first flash of genuine fear as she recognized the implications for both the campaign and her standing with the CEO. If these findings are accurate, Rob said finally, we could be facing serious legal liability, not to mention the ethical implications of misleading arthritis sufferers, many of whom are vulnerable older adults. Victoria recovered quickly. While I appreciate Ms. Morgan's thoroughness, I think we need to consider the business implications of delaying the campaign. North Star has invested heavily in the launch timeline, and we've invested heavily in our reputation for integrity, Rob countered. We'll need to revise the claims immediately. Ms. Morgan, I'd like you to lead that effort. Eleanor blinked in surprise. Me, but the digital team usually has clearly demonstrated they need oversight from someone with more rigorous analytical skills. Rob finished. Work directly with my office on this. Sophia will provide whatever resources you need. As the meeting adjourned, Victoria's fury manifested in a white-knuckled grip on her leather portfolio, her $2,000 smile failing to reach eyes that promised consequences. Eleanor gathered her materials, a mixture of vindication and apprehension churning in her stomach. As others filed out, she noticed Rob lingering, clearly waiting to speak with her privately. Ms. Morgan, he said as the room emptied, a moment of your time. She nodded, suddenly acutely aware that the CEO of Horizon Media Group was the same man who had rescued her from a potential disaster the night before. I believe this belongs to you, she said, reaching into her pocket and producing the bronze medallion. Rob looked genuinely surprised as he accepted it. I've been looking for this. It was my father's before me. Thank you for your help last night, Eleanor said. It seems I owe you twice now. How's the eye today? Better. It happens sometimes when I'm overtired. Rob studied her with the same intensity he'd shown during her presentation. Your analysis today was exceptional. Victoria's team has been unchallenged for too long. I was just doing my job, Eleanor replied, uncomfortable with the praise. From what I've observed, you've been just doing your job exceptionally well for years without proper recognition. He gestured toward the door. Walk with me. As they moved through the open office space, Eleanor was acutely aware of curious glances and whispered speculation. The CEO rarely ventured onto the general floors, and never with someone from middle management. The North Star campaign is only part of a larger problem, Rob said as they waited for the elevator. This company is at a crossroads. The financial crisis hit us harder than we've publicly admitted, and Victoria's digital transformation strategy isn't delivering the promised results. The elevator arrived, and they stepped in alone. As the doors closed, Rob pressed the button for the executive floor, a level Eleanor had visited only twice in her 9 years with the company. Why are you telling me this? She asked, genuinely puzzled. Because I need someone who sees what others miss. Someone who isn't afraid to speak uncomfortable truths. The elevator doors opened to reveal the hushed, wood-paneled environment of the executive floor. And because I suspect you care about this company's legacy as much as I do, Rob's office revealed aspects of his character that corporate mythology missed. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered both an expansive view of the city and a strange vulnerability. He could see everything, but was equally exposed. The organized chaos of papers showed an active mind constantly processing information, while framed photojournalism pieces, many from war zones, suggested priorities beyond the corporate kingdom he'd built. You were a combat photographer, Eleanor said, recognizing the composition style in the images. Rob nodded, watching her examine a particularly striking photo of soldiers in Desert Storm. Before I built Horizon into what it is today, started as a freelancer for the AP, then got picked up by Time, covered everything from Central America in the 80s to the fall of the Berlin Wall. What made you switch to advertising? A shadow crossed his face. Took some shrapnel in 91? Nothing heroic, wrong place, wrong time. While recovering, I started consulting for ad agencies on visual storytelling. One thing led to another. Eleanor nodded, understanding the omissions in his story. Her own transition from photography to data analysis after her accident had been filled with similar pain and reinvention. I have a proposal, Rob said, changing the subject abruptly. I'm forming a special task force to evaluate our entire business model and develop a survival strategy. The official announcement will come next week, but I want you on it. Eleanor stared at him in surprise. Me, I'm just an analyst in... You're exactly what this team needs, Rob interrupted. Someone who understands both traditional analytics and has the courage to challenge flawed assumptions. Victoria will oppose your inclusion. Of course. She'll do more than oppose it, Eleanor said dryly. She'll actively undermine me at every opportunity. Rob's smile was grim. I'm counting on it. Sometimes the best way to expose a problem is to give it something to react against. As Eleanor left the executive floor 30 minutes later, her mind raced with the implications of their conversation. The special assignment was a professional opportunity beyond anything she'd imagined possible at this stage of her career. But it also painted a target squarely on her back. Her phone rang as she reached her desk at the memory care facility. Her stomach dropped. They never called during work hours unless something was wrong. Ms. Morgan, this is Nurse Chen from Lakeside Memory Care. Your mother had a fall this morning. The antiseptic smell of Lakeside Memory Care Center never failed to depress Eleanor, despite the administration's efforts to mask it with potpourri and scented candles. The building itself was pleasant enough, a converted mansion in Lake Forest, with carefully maintained gardens and comfortable common areas. But beneath the upscale veneer lay the unmistakable atmosphere of life's final waiting room. Marion Morgan's room was on the second floor, overlooking what had once been a rose garden. The staff had positioned her wheelchair by the window, where afternoon sunlight illuminated features still beautiful, despite the vacancy in her eyes. "Mom," Eleanor said softly, kneeling beside the wheelchair. "It's Ellie." Marion turned slowly, her expression pleasant but uncomprehending. "Hello, dear. Are you new here?" The familiar pain stabbed through Eleanor's heart, sharper than any physical discomfort her eye could produce. "I'm your daughter, Mom." Eleanor. A flash of confusion crossed Marion's face, quickly replaced by the placid smile that had become her default expression. "Of course, dear. Eleanor. Such a pretty name." Dr. Patel found Eleanor at the nurse's station 20 minutes later, reviewing the incident report from her mother's fall. "Just bruising, thankfully," the doctor said, his gentle Indian accent softened by decades in the Midwest. "But I'm concerned about the increase in falls. We may need to consider additional care options." Additional care was a euphemism for more expensive care, and they both knew it. Eleanor nodded, mentally calculating how much more she could stretch her budget. The memory care facility already consumed most of her savings, and while her Horizon salary was decent, it wasn't extravagant. "There's something else, Doctor," Patel continued, lowering his voice. "Your mother had a moment of unusual clarity yesterday. She was asking for her journals, specifically the ones from her time as a military nurse. Said there was something important she needed to tell you?" Eleanor frowned. "Did she say what?" "No, but she was quite insistent. Do you have these journals?" "In storage, I think. They've been boxed up since I moved her here 4 years ago." Eleanor made a mental note to look for them over the weekend. "Thank you for telling me." As she drove back to the office, Eleanor's thoughts swirled between concern for her mother, the unexpected alliance with Rob Sullivan, and Victoria's inevitable retaliation. Life had been relatively stable, if not particularly exciting, for years. Now suddenly everything was shifting at once. She was so preoccupied that she nearly missed the black SUV that had been following her since she left the care facility. It maintained a constant distance, always 3 or 4 cars behind, but taking every turn she did. By the time she recognized the pattern, she was already on Lakeshore Drive with few options for evasion. Heart pounding, she tried to rationalize away her fear. Chicago traffic was heavy. Many vehicles would naturally follow similar routes. But when she deliberately took the wrong exit and the SUV followed, cold certainty replaced doubt. Acting on instinct, Eleanor swerved suddenly across 2 lanes and took a sharp right onto a side street, accelerating hard. The SUV attempted to follow but was blocked by a delivery truck. By the time it cleared the obstacle, Eleanor had made 2 more turns and found temporary sanctuary in a parking garage. She sat in her car, hands trembling on the wheel, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Was she being paranoid? Had challenging Victoria in the meeting somehow triggered this? Or was it connected to Rob's revelation about the company's precarious position? One thing was certain: returning to the office now felt dangerously exposed. Eleanor pulled out her phone and called Sophia Martinez directly, using the number Rob had given her that morning. "Ms. Morgan," Sophia answered on the second ring. "Is everything all right?" "I'm not sure," Eleanor admitted, explaining what had just happened. "It might be nothing, but—" "Where are you now?" Sophia interrupted, her tone sharpening. "Parking garage on East Grand Avenue." "Stay there. I'm sending someone to escort you back to the office." There was a pause. "And Ms. Morgan, trust your instincts. They're usually right." 20 minutes later, a company security car pulled alongside her Volvo. The driver, a former police officer named Greg, who managed Horizon's physical security, approached with a reassuring smile. "Miss Martinez sent me," he said. "I'll lead you back to the office and make sure you get safely inside." Once at Horizon, Eleanor found Sophia waiting in the lobby, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Sullivan would like to see you immediately," she said, leading Eleanor to a private elevator Eleanor hadn't known existed. "He's concerned about what you reported. It seems like an overreaction to one suspicious vehicle," Eleanor said, still half convinced she'd imagined the threat. Sophia's sideways glance was difficult to interpret. Perhaps, or perhaps there's more at stake than you realize. The elevator opened directly into a conference room adjacent to Rob's office. He was standing at a digital display board, studying what appeared to be financial projections. He turned when they entered, his expression grave. "You're all right?" he asked immediately. Eleanor nodded, suddenly feeling foolish. "I might have overreacted. It could have been coincidence." "Describe the vehicle again." Rob interrupted. "Black Cadillac Escalade. Tinted windows. I couldn't see the driver or the plates." Rob and Sophia exchanged a look that made Eleanor's stomach tighten. "What's going on?" she demanded. "Why would anyone be following me?" Rob sighed, gesturing for her to sit. "What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room." He glanced at Sophia, who nodded and closed the door. "Horizon isn't just facing financial difficulties. We've discovered evidence of systematic financial manipulation designed to depress our stock value." Eleanor stared at him. "You think someone's deliberately tanking the company? Why? To make us vulnerable to acquisition," Sophia supplied. "Global Vision has made 3 increasingly aggressive overtures in the past 18 months. Global Vision, Eleanor knew the name, one of the largest international media conglomerates, known for acquiring struggling agencies, stripping their assets, and discarding the remains. Rob nodded grimly. "We believe someone inside Horizon is helping them, undermining us from within to facilitate a hostile takeover." The implication hung in the air. Eleanor vocalized what they were all thinking. "Victoria." "We have suspicions but no proof," Rob said carefully. "That's part of what this task force will be investigating, which is why your safety is now a concern." Eleanor felt a chill that had nothing to do with the office temperature. "You think I was being followed because of what happened in the meeting this morning? That seems extreme." "The North Star campaign is worth $50 million, Sophia pointed out. "And your analysis threatens to delay or significantly alter it. Not to mention that we've now publicly aligned you with the CEO, Rob added. "If Victoria is working with Global Vision, you've just become a significant obstacle." Eleanor took a deep breath, trying to process the escalating stakes. What had begun as a simple data discrepancy was rapidly evolving into corporate espionage territory. "What happens now?" she asked. Rob moved to the window, looking out over the city as dusk began to fall. "We accelerate the plan. The task force becomes official tomorrow, not next week. You'll work directly from the executive floor for security reasons." He turned back to her. "And I think you should stay somewhere other than your home for a few days." "That's absurd," Eleanor protested. "I'm not going to be driven from my house over corporate politics." "This stopped being just corporate politics when someone followed you from the care facility," Sophia pointed out. "They know your routines, your vulnerabilities." "My mother will have additional security," Rob assured her. "I've already arranged it." Eleanor studied him with new wariness. "You've arranged it? How could you possibly have done that in the 20 minutes since I called Sophia?" Rob and Sophia exchanged another of those meaningful glances that Eleanor was beginning to find irritating. "Because we've been watching Victoria for months," Rob admitted, "and by extension, monitoring potential targets of her attention." "You've been watching me?" Eleanor stood abruptly, anger replacing fear. "For how long?" "Not watching," Sophia clarified. "Assessing. Your analytical work caught our attention last year during the Westridge campaign. We've been evaluating your potential as an ally ever since." "Without my knowledge or consent," Eleanor said flatly. Rob at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I apologize for the methods, but the situation required discretion. We needed to know who could be trusted." Eleanor gathered her belongings, a cold fury building. "Let me be very clear. Mr. Sullivan, I care about this company and its legacy, as you suggested earlier. I believe in ethical business practices and data integrity, but I do not appreciate being manipulated, surveilled, or managed even with good intentions." She moved toward the door, then turned back. I'll join your task force because the work matters. I'll help identify whoever is undermining Horizon because that's the right thing to do. But don't ever presume to make security arrangements for me or my mother without consulting me first." A flicker of respect showed in Rob's eyes. "Understood, Ms. Morgan. My apologies." As Eleanor left, Sophia raised an eyebrow at Rob. "Well, you certainly know how to make an impression." Rob ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "I handled that poorly." "Yes, you did," Sophia agreed without hesitation. "But she's still on board, which is what matters." She paused. "She reminds me of Diane. You know, that same backbone." Rob's expression darkened at the mention of his ex-wife. Let's hope this ends differently. Eleanor's apartment felt different that evening, less like a sanctuary and more like potential exposure. She checked the locks twice, drew all the blinds, and found herself jumping at every creak and distant car door. "This is ridiculous," she muttered to herself as she prepared a simple dinner. "No one is coming after a middle-aged data analyst over a pharmaceutical campaign." But Rob's warnings echoed in her mind. If Victoria truly was facilitating a hostile takeover, the stakes were much higher than one campaign. They involved the livelihoods of over 800 Horizon employees, not to mention the company's 50-year legacy. Eleanor's phone rang, startling her so badly she nearly dropped her plate. The caller ID showed her daughter's name. "Sarah," she answered, trying to keep her voice normal. "How's my favorite doctor? Exhausted," came the reply, the sounds of a busy hospital audible in the background. "Just finishing a 36-hour shift and thought I'd check in." "How are things in the exciting world of media analytics?" Eleanor hesitated. She and Sarah had always been close, especially after Daniel's death, but she was reluctant to worry her daughter unnecessarily. "Actually, things are interesting at the moment," she said carefully. "I've been appointed to a special task force reporting directly to the CEO." "Mom, that's fantastic." Sarah's genuine enthusiasm warmed Eleanor. "Finally recognizing your brilliance after how many years?" "9, but who's counting?" Eleanor smiled despite her tension. "How's grandmother doing? Have you spoken to Dr. Patel recently?" There was a slight pause. "I called the facility yesterday. They said she had a fall. Just bruising, thankfully, but they're recommending increased care." Another pause. "Mom, you know I can help with the expenses. Jason and I—" "Absolutely not," Eleanor interrupted. "You have student loans to pay off and a life to build. I'm managing fine." It wasn't entirely true, but Eleanor would rather eat ramen noodles for a year than take money from her daughter and son-in-law. They'd offered repeatedly, but this was her responsibility. Marion had sacrificed everything to raise Eleanor alone. The least Eleanor could do was ensure her mother's final years were comfortable. After promising to visit soon, Sarah hung up, leaving Eleanor alone with her thoughts again. She wandered to the spare bedroom she'd converted into a home office, eyeing the closet where boxes of her mother's belongings were stored. Dr. Patel's mention of the journals nagged at her. What could be so important that it had broken through her mother's dementia? Even temporarily, Eleanor opened the closet and pulled out the first storage box, labeled Mom, Military Years. Inside were carefully preserved mementos from Marion's time as an Army nurse, her uniform, commendations, photographs of a young Marion with patients and fellow nurses. At the bottom of the box, wrapped in acid-free tissue paper, lay 3 leather-bound journals. Eleanor sat cross-legged on the floor, carefully opening the first one. Her mother's elegant handwriting filled the pages, detailing her experiences treating wounded soldiers in various conflicts. Eleanor skimmed, looking for anything that might explain her mother's sudden urgency. The first journal covered Vietnam, the second the later Cold War years. The third began with entries from 1990 as tensions in the Middle East escalated toward Desert Storm. A photograph slipped from between the pages, a young soldier with a bandaged head, looking directly at the camera with startlingly familiar blue eyes. Eleanor turned it over. on the back. In her mother's handwriting, Cap. Robert Sullivan, photojournalist. Shrapnel wounds. January 1991. Eleanor stared at the image, recognition dawning slowly. The young wounded soldier was Rob, 30 years younger, but unmistakably him. According to the journal entry, he had been brought in after taking shrapnel to the head and shoulder while photographing a combat operation. An unusual patient, Marion had written, despite serious injuries, more concerned about his camera equipment than himself. Kept talking about the images he needed to transmit, saying one photo could change how Americans understood the war. Found myself breaking protocol to help him send his film back with a departing transport. Something about his dedication felt important, necessary. Eleanor flipped through more pages, finding additional entries about Rob's recovery. Her mother had clearly been impressed by him, noting his determination during physical therapy and his unwillingness to be evacuated to Germany for further treatment until he'd completed his assignment. The final entry about him read, "Sullivan discharged today. His parting words will stay with me. Truth is worth the scars." Later saw his photograph on the cover of Time, the one he was so desperate to transmit. It captured something essential about both the horror and humanity of this conflict. Perhaps he was right about one image changing perspectives. Eleanor sat back, mind racing. Her mother had treated Rob during the very injury he'd mentioned today. And now, 34 years later, Eleanor was working directly with him during another kind of crisis. The coincidence seemed too perfect to be random. Had her mother somehow engineered their connection? But that was impossible. Marion had been in the grip of advancing dementia when Eleanor joined Horizon 9 years ago, hardly in a position to orchestrate a professional introduction. Yet something about the situation nagged at Eleanor. Rob had recognized her name earlier, asked if she'd worked on the Westridge campaign. Had he known who she was all along? Was her random encounter with him last night actually planned? A sudden crash from the kitchen shattered her thoughts. Eleanor froze, listening intently. It could be nothing, a dish settling, the building making normal noises. Then came the unmistakable sound of the kitchen window sliding open. Someone was breaking in. Eleanor moved silently, her heart pounding as she closed the office door and locked it. She grabbed her phone, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. 911, what's your emergency? Someone's breaking into my apartment, she whispered, giving the address. I'm alone and locked in the back bedroom. Officers are on the way. Stay on the line with me. Eleanor heard footsteps moving through her living room, the deliberate tread of someone trying to be quiet, but not entirely succeeding. The intruder was methodically searching the apartment, moving from room to room. When the footsteps approached her office door, Eleanor held her breath. The handle turned, found resistance from the lock, then stopped. For a moment, there was silence. Then a shoulder slammed against the door, the wood frame splintering slightly from the impact. Another slam, harder this time. The frame cracked further. They're trying to break down the door, Eleanor whispered into the phone. Please hurry. Officers are 2 minutes out, the dispatcher assured her. Is there anywhere you can hide? Eleanor looked around desperately. The room had no closet aside from the one already open and filled with boxes. The window led to a 3-story drop. The third impact broke the lock completely. As the door began to swing open, Eleanor grabbed the only weapon available, a heavy metal desk lamp, and pressed herself against the wall where the door would temporarily hide her. A figure entered, cautiously male, dressed in dark clothes, wearing a ski mask. He moved directly to her computer, apparently unaware of her presence behind the door. As he inserted a USB drive into her laptop, Eleanor acted on pure adrenaline. She swung the lamp with all her strength, connecting solidly with the intruder's shoulder. He grunted in pain, turning to face her with surprise evident even through the mask. Eleanor struck again, catching him on the side of the head this time. The intruder staggered, clearly not expecting such fierce resistance from a 58-year-old woman. But as he regained his balance, his hand moved toward his waistband, where the outline of a weapon was now visible. Time slowed to a crawl. Eleanor saw the gun emerging, knew she had seconds at most. In the distance, sirens wailed, still too far away. The window behind the intruder exploded inward in a shower of glass. A second figure burst through larger, moving with military precision. Before the first intruder could fully draw his weapon, the newcomer had him in a chokehold, twisting the gun from his grasp with practiced efficiency. Eleanor stared in shock as Rob Sullivan, still in his business suit, now torn and bloodied from the window entry, efficiently subdued her attacker, forcing him face down on the carpet with a knee in his back. "Are you hurt?" Rob asked, his voice steady despite the violence of the previous moments. Eleanor shook her head mutely, unable to process what had just happened. "Police are coming," she finally managed, holding up her phone where the 911 dispatcher was still speaking. Rob nodded, maintaining his hold on the struggling intruder. "Good. We'll need them." As the sirens grew louder, Eleanor found her voice again. "How did you know? How did you get here?" Rob met her eyes, his expression grim. "I had someone watching your building, despite your objections. When they reported a suspicious figure approaching your fire escape, I was already on my way to warn you." The first police officers arrived seconds later, weapons drawn. The next hour passed in a blur of statements, evidence collection, and medical checks. The intruder remained silent, refusing to identify himself even when formally arrested. As the police finally cleared out, leaving an officer stationed outside for the night, Eleanor found herself sitting beside Rob on her living room sofa. An EMT had bandaged the cuts on his hands and arms from the window glass, but he'd refused further treatment. "You could have been killed," she said quietly. "So could you," he replied, "which is why I ignored your directive about security arrangements." Eleanor studied him, seeing beyond the CEO to the former combat photographer and soldier. "Why are you personally involved in this? You could have sent security personnel." Rob was silent for a long moment. "Because I recognized your name the moment I saw your analysis flagged in the system. Eleanor Morgan, daughter of Marion Morgan, Army nurse. She used to write to me after the war, sending updates about her patients, including me." Eleanor's breath caught. "You knew who I was all along, even last night at the accident." "No." Rob shook his head. "Last night was genuine coincidence. I didn't make the connection until this morning when Sophia mentioned your background in photography. Then it clicked your mother used to mention her daughter, the photographer, in her letters. Why didn't you say anything? Corporate politics is complicated enough without adding personal connections," Rob said with a wry smile. "But when I saw the danger you were in after this morning's meeting," he shrugged. "Let's just say I owe your mother a debt I can never repay. She saved more than just my physical health during a very dark time." Eleanor thought about the journal entries, about her mother's admiration for the determined young photojournalist. "She kept a journal about that time. She mentioned you." "I'd like to read it someday, if that's possible," Rob said softly. Eleanor nodded, then gestured to the broken window and door. "I can't stay here tonight. I have a guest house at my Lake Forest property," Rob offered, "completely separate from the main residence, with its own security system. You'd be safe there while your apartment is repaired." Under normal circumstances, Eleanor would have refused, but normal had evaporated somewhere between corporate espionage, car chases, and home invasions. "I'll need to get something," she said. Rob nodded. "Pack quickly. Whoever sent this man will know he failed soon enough. They'll try again, probably with more force next time." As Eleanor gathered essential items, the reality of her situation sank in fully. In less than 24 hours, her carefully constructed, predictable life had been completely upended. She was now embroiled in what appeared to be a high-stakes corporate war, allied with a CEO who shared an unexpected connection to her past and targeted by forces willing to use violence to stop her. And somewhere in the background, the mystery of why her mother had suddenly remembered her military journals lingered, suggesting there might be even deeper connections yet to be discovered. Eleanor zipped her suitcase, squared her shoulders, and rejoined Rob in the living room. Whatever came next, she would face it with the same resilience that had carried her through every previous challenge: her father's abandonment, her accident, Daniel's death, her mother's illness. "I'm ready," she said simply. Rob nodded, recognizing the steel beneath her calm exterior. "Then let's go." As they left the apartment under police escort, neither noticed the figure watching from a car across the street, a woman with silver blonde hair, her manicured fingers tapping impatiently on the steering wheel as she made a call. "It's me," Victoria Blackwell said into her phone. "We have a problem. Sullivan is personally involved now." She listened for a moment, her expression hardening. "No, that won't be necessary yet. I have another approach in mind. After all, everyone has vulnerabilities. We just need to find Morgan's." The guest house on Rob Sullivan's Lake Forest estate was larger than Eleanor's entire apartment. Nestled at the edge of a wooded area that backed up to Lake Michigan, the stone cottage featured vaulted ceilings, a fully equipped kitchen, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered breathtaking views of the water. "This is your idea of a guest house?" Eleanor asked as Rob disarmed the security system and ushered her inside. "It was originally the caretaker's cottage," he explained, seeming almost embarrassed by the luxury. "I had it renovated a few years ago for visiting family." The cottage was warm and inviting despite its size, with comfortable furniture and well-stocked bookshelves. But what caught Eleanor's attention immediately were the photographs, dozens of them, professionally framed and displayed throughout the space. Combat zones, political protests, humanitarian crises, all captured with an unflinching eye for human emotion. "Your work," she asked, studying a particularly powerful image of a nurse cradling an injured child amidst the rubble of what appeared to be a bombed hospital. Rob nodded. "From my previous life, I keep them here rather than in the main house. Too many questions from corporate visitors." Eleanor moved from photo to photo, recognizing many iconic moments from the late 20th century. "These should be in a museum, not hidden away in a guest house." "Perhaps someday," Rob said with a shrug. "The security code is 1991. Appropriate, considering our connection. There's food in the refrigerator, and Sophia has arranged for your things to be delivered from your office tomorrow morning." "Thank you," Eleanor said, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. The adrenaline that had carried her through the home invasion was fading, leaving bone-deep fatigue in its wake. Rob seemed to notice. "Get some rest. We'll talk strategy in the morning." He moved toward the door, then paused. "And Eleanor, I meant what I said about owing your mother a debt. Whatever happens with Horizon, I'll make sure you and Marion are taken care of." Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving Eleanor alone with her thoughts and the ghostly images of conflicts long past. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by nightmares of masked intruders and shattered glass. Eleanor woke at dawn, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings, before reality reasserted itself. She showered and dressed in the previous day's clothes, then explored the kitchen to make coffee. As the coffee brewed, she noticed a stack of newspapers on the counter, not just today's Chicago Tribune, but papers from across the country and around the world. Old habits from his correspondent days, she guessed. The front page of the Tribune featured a story about an attempted corporate takeover in the healthcare sector. Eleanor scanned it absently, then froze when a name jumped out at her global vision. The article detailed the conglomerate's aggressive acquisition strategy and its latest target, a pharmaceutical distribution company with strong Midwest connections. "Making your move, aren't you?" she murmured, reading further. The piece quoted financial analysts speculating about Global Vision's next targets, with several suggesting media companies might be in their sights. A knock at the door interrupted her reading. Eleanor tensed momentarily before remembering the security system and the unlikelihood that any threat could penetrate this far onto Rob's property undetected. It was Sophia, carrying a box of files and a garment bag. "Good morning, Miss Morgan. I've brought your office materials and some fresh clothes." She handed Eleanor a smartphone. "And a secure phone. Your regular one may be compromised." "Thank you," Eleanor said, taking the items. "Is Rob Mr. Sullivan around. He left for a meeting downtown about an hour ago. There's been a development. Sophia's normally impassive expression showed hints of concern. The intruder from last night was found dead in his holding cell this morning. Apparent suicide, though circumstances are questionable. Eleanor sank into a chair, the newspaper forgotten. Dead? How is that possible? The official story is that he used his shoelaces to hang himself when the guards were changing shifts. Unofficially, there's evidence suggesting he had help. Sophia's tone was clinical, but her eyes conveyed the gravity of the situation. This is no longer just corporate espionage, Miss Morgan. These are people willing to commit murder to protect their interests. Eleanor thought of her mother, vulnerable in the care facility. I need to move my mother somewhere safer. Already in progress, Sophia assured her. Mr. Sullivan arranged a transfer to a private facility with enhanced security this morning. Dr. Patel is overseeing the move personally. Relief flooded Eleanor, followed immediately by frustration. He's still making decisions without consulting me. In this case, time was of the essence, Sophia said unapologetically. The transfer paperwork lists you as the authorizing party. If that helps, it didn't, particularly, but Eleanor recognized the practicality of the action. What's our next move? The task force meets at Mr. Sullivan's downtown residence at 11 a.m. It's a secure location not associated with Horizon in any official capacity. Sophia handed her a key card. This will get you access to the private elevator. A car will pick you up at 10:30. After Sophia left, Eleanor changed into the fresh clothes her own, retrieved from her office and reviewed the files. They contained detailed financial records for Horizon over the past 3 years, with particular emphasis on the performance of Victoria's digital marketing division. The numbers told a disturbing story. Projects under Victoria's direct control consistently underperformed compared to projections, yet continued to receive increased funding. Traditional marketing efforts, meanwhile, were systematically starved of resources despite better ROI. The pattern suggested deliberate misallocation designed to weaken the company while maintaining plausible deniability. But the most damning evidence came from comparing internal performance metrics with the public financial reports. Someone had been systematically manipulating the data presented to shareholders, making the situation appear less dire than it actually was. By the time the car arrived, Eleanor had filled a legal pad with notes and questions. The gravity of what she'd discovered weighed heavily as she rode to the downtown address Sophia had provided. Rob's private residence occupied the top 2 floors of a renovated industrial building in River North. Unlike his Lake Forest estate, this space was minimalist and urban, with exposed brick walls, concrete floors softened by area rugs, and an open floor plan that emphasized the spectacular city views. The task force had assembled around a large table in what appeared to be a combination dining and conference area. Eleanor recognized several faces from Horizon's executive team, along with 2 people she didn't know: a sharp-featured woman in her 40s, introduced as Anita Chaudhry, Horizon's outside legal counsel, and a serious young man named Marcus Wong, who headed the company's internal cybersecurity division. Rob greeted Eleanor with a nod, gesturing to an empty seat beside him. Ms. Morgan, thank you for joining us. I believe you've reviewed the financial materials. Yes, Eleanor confirmed, opening her notebook. And I have concerns beyond what we initially discussed. For the next 2 hours, the group dissected the evidence Eleanor had compiled, along with additional information from Marcus about suspicious access to Horizon's secure servers from Victoria's department. The pattern is clear, Rob concluded as they finished reviewing the data. Victoria has been systematically undermining Horizon's financial position while maintaining the appearance of innovation and growth. The question is, what's her endgame? If Global Vision acquires us, she's as likely to be terminated as anyone else. Unless she's been promised a position in the new organization, Anita suggested, perhaps heading a consolidated marketing division with a significant compensation package. There's another possibility, Eleanor said, thinking of the newspaper article she'd read that morning. Global Vision's recent acquisitions have all been in healthcare-adjacent industries. The North Star Pharmaceutical campaign represents our biggest current healthcare client. What if Victoria's manipulation of the efficacy data wasn't just about making the campaign more appealing, but about creating potential legal liability? The table fell silent as the implications sank in. A deliberate vulnerability, Rob said slowly. If Horizon launches a campaign with demonstrably false claims about a pharmaceutical product, we'd be exposed to massive legal action, Anita finished grimly. The resulting financial damage would make an acquisition by Global Vision not just attractive, but necessary for survival. And given the timing of the campaign launch, the damage would be done before we could recover, Marcus added. It's elegant, in a devious way. Eleanor felt cold fury building as the full scope of Victoria's betrayal became clear. This wasn't just about corporate positioning or personal advancement. It was a calculated plan that would destroy hundreds of careers in a company with a 50-year legacy of integrity. We need evidence that directly links Victoria to Global Vision, she said firmly. Financial records, communications, meeting logs, something that proves conspiracy rather than just incompetence. Rob nodded. That's our next step. Marcus will lead the digital investigation. Anita will prepare legal options based on what we find. The rest of us need to maintain normal operations at Horizon to avoid tipping our hand. As the meeting adjourned, Rob asked Eleanor to stay behind. When they were alone, he moved to a side table and poured 2 glasses of water. You connected dots that no one else saw, he said, handing her one of the glasses. The North Star campaign as deliberate liability creation that wasn't on our radar. Pattern recognition is what I do, Eleanor said simply. But there's something I don't understand. Why would Victoria risk criminal charges, corporate espionage, and market manipulation carry serious penalties? Rob's expression darkened. Because Victoria believes she's untouchable. She has connections, political and otherwise. He hesitated, then added, and there's a personal element you should be aware of. Victoria Blackwell was Victoria Sullivan until 8 years ago. Eleanor stared at him, processing the implication. She's your ex-wife. Yes, our divorce was contentious. She believed I owed her more than the considerable settlement she received. Rob's voice was carefully neutral, but Eleanor could sense the pain beneath. I knew she was ambitious and ruthless in business, but I never imagined she'd go this far. Why didn't you tell me this before? I wanted your unbiased assessment of the situation. If you'd known about our personal history, it might have colored your analysis. He met her eyes directly. And frankly, it's not something I'm proud of, failing to recognize what kind of person I was married to for 15 years. Eleanor thought of her own brief marriage to Daniel Loving, but cut tragically short by his sudden heart attack. She couldn't imagine the pain of discovering a long-term partner was capable of such calculated betrayal. What happened between you? She asked, then immediately regretted the personal question. I'm sorry, that's none of my business. It's relevant context, Rob said with a wry smile. Victoria and I met when she was a junior account executive, and I was already CEO. The power imbalance should have been a red flag, but he shrugged. We married after a whirlwind courtship. For a while, it seemed perfect. She was ambitious. I was building Horizon into a major player. Our son, Michael, was born a year later. You have a son? Eleanor was surprised. There had been no mention of children in any of their previous conversations. He's 26 now, works for Doctors Without Borders in Sudan. We're not close. The pain was evident now, despite Rob's attempt to maintain composure. Victoria turned him against me during the divorce, convinced him that my workaholic tendencies and emotional unavailability were forms of abandonment. Eleanor could hear the self-recrimination in his voice. And was there truth to that? Rob looked out the window, silent for a long moment. Yes, I was absent too often. Delegated parenting to nannies in Victoria. Built a company at the expense of a relationship with my son. Victoria's methods were manipulative, but her core accusation wasn't wrong. The vulnerability in his admission struck Eleanor deeply. Before she could respond, his secure phone rang. He answered, listening intently, his expression shifting from interest to alarm. When, he demanded, was anyone hurt? Another pause. Double the security immediately. I'll be there within the hour. He ended the call, already moving toward the door. There's been a fire at Horizon, 12th floor, right where Victoria's office and yours are located. A fire? Eleanor followed him, grabbing her coat. Was it deliberately set? Almost certainly. Forensics teams are already on site. Rob's jaw was set in a hard line. This is escalating faster than we anticipated. They're getting desperate. The acrid smell of smoke lingered in the corridor of Horizon's 12th floor. Despite the industrial fans working to clear the air, yellow police tape cordoned off a section of offices where fire investigators in protective gear sifted through charred remains of furniture and equipment. Rob strode directly to the chief investigator, a heavy-set man with a salt and pepper mustache who introduced himself as Battalion Chief Gannon. Eleanor followed, trying to process the destruction around her. Definitely arson, Gannon confirmed after preliminary pleasantries. Accelerant was used on specific targets, mainly file cabinets and computer equipment, in 2 offices. Which 2? Rob asked, though Eleanor suspected he already knew the answer. Marketing Director's office, Victoria Blackwell, and one belonging to... Gannon consulted his notes. Eleanor Morgan, Data Analytics Manager. Eleanor felt a chill despite the residual heat in the corridor. My office, everything's gone. Gannon nodded grimly. Pretty thorough job. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were targeting. Security cameras, Rob asked, conveniently malfunctioning during the estimated time of the fire. Gannon replied, your security chief is reviewing footage from other floors to see if the perpetrator was captured elsewhere. As Rob continued discussing details with the fire chief, Eleanor moved closer to what remained of her office doorway. The interior was a blackened shell, her desk reduced to a metal frame, the computer a melted mass of plastic and circuitry, years of work, research, and personal mementos gone. Anything irreplaceable. Eleanor turned to find Sophia standing beside her, surveying the damage with practiced detachment. Most of my work was backed up on the secure server, Eleanor said, trying to match Sophia's composure. But there were photographs, personal items. From your husband. Sophia's question was gentle despite her businesslike demeanor. Eleanor nodded, surprising herself with the sudden sting of tears. And some of my mother's things I kept at the office. Silly mementos. Really. But irreplaceable, Sophia finished. I'm sorry, Eleanor. This kind of targeted destruction is meant to feel personal, invasive. It's a psychological tactic as much as an attempt to destroy evidence. From the corridor came the sound of raised voices. Eleanor and Sophia exchanged glances before moving toward the commotion. Victoria Blackwell stood facing Rob, her designer suit immaculate, her expression a perfect blend of shock and executive concern. Robert, this is outrageous, she was saying as they approached. My entire office destroyed. Critical campaign materials lost. And I have to hear about it from my assistant rather than directly from you. Perhaps because we've been somewhat busy dealing with an arson investigation? Victoria, Rob replied, his tone icy. Though I notice you don't seem particularly surprised by what happened. Victoria's eyes narrowed dangerously. Are you implying I had something to do with this? That's absurd. Why would I destroy my own office and materials? To eliminate evidence, perhaps, Rob suggested mildly, or to create a convincing cover story. Victoria's gaze shifted to Eleanor, something calculating and cold flashing behind her professionally concerned expression. Ms. Morgan, I'm so sorry your office was targeted as well. How fortunate that you weren't working late as you usually do. The implied threat was unmistakable. Victoria knew Eleanor's work habits, knew she should have been in her office at the time of the fire. Was expressing disappointment, not relief, that she hadn't been, yes, quite fortunate. Eleanor agreed, meeting Victoria's gaze steadily. Though I'm sure building security footage will show exactly where everyone was when the fire started. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Victoria's face before her practiced smile reasserted itself. Of course, I was at dinner with the North Star executives. As my calendar indicates, dozens of witnesses can confirm. She turned back to Rob. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to check on my team and establish a recovery plan for the North Star campaign materials. As Victoria walked away, Sophia moved closer to Rob and Eleanor. She's lying about something, she murmured. That micro-expression when Eleanor mentioned security footage, she's worried about something specific. Have Marcus pull all footage from the building between 6 p.m. and midnight, Rob instructed. And put a discreet tail on Victoria. I want to know where she goes, who she meets with. Eleanor watched Victoria's retreating figure, something nagging at her analyst's mind. She emphasized the North Star campaign materials specifically. Twice. Rob nodded slowly. You think that's significant? I think it's deliberate, Eleanor replied. She wants us focused on what was supposedly destroyed rather than what might have been taken. The original data, Sophia realized, the unaltered efficacy reports that would prove the manipulation, which were stored in the secure server room on the 5th floor, not in either of our offices, Eleanor confirmed. The fire could be a distraction while someone accessed those files. Rob was already on his phone, instructing Marcus to check the secure server room for any unauthorized access. When he hung up, his expression was grim. We need to accelerate our timeline. Victoria knows we're onto her, even if she doesn't know how much we've discovered. She's going to push the North Star campaign launch and force the Global Vision acquisition before we can gather enough evidence. The board meeting is scheduled for Friday, Sophia reminded him. 3 days from now, that's when they'll vote on the final North Star campaign approval. And when Victoria will likely make her move, Rob agreed. We need concrete evidence linking her to Global Vision before then. He turned to Eleanor. You should go home to the guest house. I mean, you've been through enough today. Eleanor shook her head firmly. No, I'm seeing this through. Victoria didn't just attack the company. She tried to destroy my work, my personal belongings. She made this personal. Rob studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right, but we do this by the book. No unnecessary risks. As they left the smoky corridor, Eleanor glanced back at the ruins of her office. Whatever happened next, there would be no going back to the life she'd known before. Too much had been destroyed both physically and metaphorically. The Lake Michigan shoreline stretched out before Eleanor as she jogged along the private beach adjoining Rob's property. The physical exertion helped clear her mind after the chaos of the day, the rhythmic pounding of her feet on wet sand providing a welcome counterpoint to the swirling questions and theories. She'd been running for about 20 minutes when she spotted a figure ahead, silhouetted against the setting sun. As she drew closer, she recognized Rob, standing at the water's edge, skipping stones across the gentle waves. He turned at the sound of her approach, offering a small smile. Clearing your head. Trying to, she admitted, slowing to a walk as she reached him. Not entirely successfully. It's the paradox of movement, Rob said, selecting another flat stone from the shoreline. The body busy, the mind free to wander wherever it needs to go. He demonstrated perfect form as he sent the stone skipping 6 times across the water's surface. You're good at that, Eleanor observed. Lots of practice. I come out here most evenings when I'm at the Lake Forest house. It's meditative. He offered her a stone. Want to try? Eleanor accepted the stone, feeling its weight and contours. I was never very good at this. Daniel used to try to teach me, but I could never get the wrist action right. Your husband, Rob asked gently. Eleanor nodded. He died 6 years ago. Sudden heart attack at 54. No warning signs, no family history. Just gone. She attempted to skip the stone, but it sank immediately. Still terrible at it, apparently. May I? Rob asked, stepping closer. When she nodded, he positioned himself behind her, his hand guiding her wrist. It's all in the angle and the release. Like this. With his guidance, her next throw sent the stone skipping 3 times before sinking. The small success felt disproportionately satisfying. There you go, Rob said, stepping back to a more professional distance. You're a natural. Hardly, Eleanor laughed, the sound surprising her. When was the last time she genuinely laughed? But thank you for the lesson. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the waves lap at the shore. The sun was setting in earnest now, painting the sky in dramatic oranges and purples. I spoke with Dr. Patel, Rob said eventually. Your mother is settled in the new facility. He says she's doing well, though she's been asking for you. Eleanor felt a pang of guilt. With everything happening, she hadn't been able to visit Marion during the transfer. I'll go tomorrow morning. I'll have a car and security ready whenever you want to leave. Rob skipped another stone, this one traveling impressively far. There's something else you should know. Marcus found evidence of unauthorized access to the secure server room during the fire. Someone used Victoria's credentials to download files related to the North Star campaign. Stored the original data, and more. Financial projections, legal assessments, client contracts, everything needed to create a comprehensive vulnerability assessment for Global Vision. Eleanor processed this information. The implications clear. She's preparing their takeover strategy. Yes, and there's more. Anita discovered that Victoria has a previously undisclosed financial stake in a Global Vision subsidiary. She stands to make millions if the acquisition goes through. Rob's expression was a complex mixture of anger and what looked almost like grief. She's been planning this for years. Eleanor, our divorce wasn't just personal, it was strategic. She needed freedom to operate without my knowledge. The pain in his voice moved Eleanor unexpectedly. Despite his power and position, in this moment Rob seemed profoundly human, a man facing betrayal by someone he had once loved and trusted. I'm sorry, she said simply. Rob gave her a sidelong glance. For what? That you have to go through this. Personal betrayal compounded by professional sabotage. That's a lot for anyone to handle. He was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the darkening lake. The worst part isn't what she's done to me, or even to Horizon. It's what she did to our son, used him as a weapon, poisoned his perception of his father. Michael hasn't spoken to me in 6 years. Eleanor thought of her own daughter, of the close relationship they maintained despite the geographical distance. The thought of such estrangement was painful to contemplate. Have you tried to reach out to him? Countless times, letters, emails, attempted phone calls. I even flew to Sudan last year. He refused to see me? Rob's voice was carefully controlled, but Eleanor could hear the effort it cost him. Victoria convinced him that my work always came first, that people were just tools to be used for my success. And the hell of it is, there was enough truth in that to make it stick. People change, Eleanor said quietly. I'm not the same person I was when Daniel died, or when my accident ended my photography career. Crisis has a way of clarifying what actually matters. Rob turned to face her fully, his eyes searching hers. And what matters to you? Eleanor Morgan. The directness of the question caught her off guard. What did matter to her now? Her career had been fulfilling, but not passionate. Her relationship with Sarah was strong, but increasingly distant as her daughter built her own life. Her mother was slipping away day by day. Truth, she said finally. Integrity. Making whatever time I have left count for something meaningful. She smiled slightly. And apparently, corporate espionage investigations. That's new. Rob laughed, the sound unexpectedly warm in the gathering darkness. Not exactly what you envisioned for your late 50s, I imagine. Not exactly, Eleanor agreed. But then, I didn't envision a lot of things that happened. Some terrible, some... She hesitated, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. how the shared vulnerability of the past few minutes had created an intimacy neither had anticipated. "Some," Rob prompted softly. Before Eleanor could respond, a security guard appeared at the edge of the beach, calling out to them, "Mr. Sullivan, urgent call from Ms. Martinez." The moment broken. They made their way quickly back to the house. Rob took the call in his study while Eleanor waited in the kitchen, making tea to occupy her hands and trying not to analyze whatever had been developing between them on the beach. When Rob emerged, his expression was tense. "Victoria's called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning instead of Friday. She's making her move early. Can she do that without your approval? With support from 3 board members? Yes. She's clearly secured the necessary allies." Rob ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "We're not ready. The evidence we have is compelling, but not conclusive. Without direct proof of collusion with Global Vision, it's her word against ours." Eleanor thought rapidly, her analyst's mind sorting through possibilities. "What about the North Star data? If we can prove she deliberately manipulated efficacy claims, that would demonstrate ethical misconduct, but not necessarily a connection to Global Vision." Rob pointed out, "We need more." An idea began forming in Eleanor's mind, risky, potentially reckless, but possibly their only option. What if we could get Victoria to reveal her connection to Global Vision directly, to admit her plans on record? Rob looked skeptical. "She's too careful for that." "Not when she thinks she's won," Eleanor said, the plan crystallizing as she spoke. "Victoria believes the original data was destroyed in the fire. She doesn't know we've secured backup copies. If she believes she succeeded in eliminating all evidence against her, she might get overconfident," Rob finished, understanding dawning. "But how do we engineer that situation?" Eleanor took a deep breath, knowing what she was about to suggest would likely be rejected immediately. "We let her think she's turned me against you, that I'm willing to join her side to protect my own interests." Rob stared at her in disbelief. "That's incredibly dangerous. Victoria is ruthless. Eleanor, if she suspects a trap—" "She won't," Eleanor insisted. "Think about it from her perspective. I'm a middle-aged woman whose career she's repeatedly blocked. You've suddenly elevated me to a position of influence, which she'll view as a threat. If I approach her claiming disillusionment with you and concern for my own future, it's entirely plausible." "And what exactly would this accomplish?" "Access," Eleanor explained. "Access to her files, her meetings, her communications with Global Vision. I could wear a recording device." "Absolutely not," Rob said firmly. "I'm not putting you in that position. Victoria has already demonstrated she's willing to use violence to achieve her goals, which is exactly why we need to stop her before the board meeting," Eleanor argued. "Once she consolidates power and initiates the Global Vision acquisition, hundreds of people lose their livelihoods, including me." Rob paced the kitchen, clearly torn between the strategic logic of her plan and concern for her safety. "There has to be another way." "If there is, I'm all ears," Eleanor said. "But we're out of time and options." Before Rob could respond, his phone rang again. He answered, listened briefly, then put it on speaker. "Repeat that for Eleanor. Please, Marcus. I've been monitoring Victoria's communications." Marcus's voice came through clearly. "She just booked a private dining room at Gibson's for 9 p.m. tonight. The reservation is under G. Montgomery." "Gregory Montgomery is Global Vision's acquisition director," Rob explained to Eleanor. "They're meeting tonight," Eleanor said, the implications clear. "This is our chance. Rob, if I can get into that meeting somehow, get them on record discussing the takeover." Rob still looked deeply uncomfortable with the idea. "Even if I agreed to this, which I haven't, how would you justify your presence at a private dinner?" Eleanor thought quickly. "I don't need to be inside. If Marcus can provide the right equipment, I could position myself near enough to capture their conversation. Gibson's has an adjoining bar area, doesn't it?" "It does," Rob confirmed, still frowning. "But this is a significant risk. Eleanor, these people have already tried to harm you twice, which is why I'm invested in stopping them." she countered. This isn't just about Horizon anymore. It's personal for both of us. Their eyes locked in silent communication, concern versus determination, caution versus necessity. Finally, Rob sighed, his shoulders dropping slightly in resignation. If and I stress if we attempt this, you'll have security nearby at all times. You'll wear both audio and video recording equipment, and at the first sign of danger, you'll abort immediately. Are those terms acceptable? Eleanor nodded, both relieved and suddenly nervous now that her plan was actually moving forward. Yes, absolutely. Rob checked his watch. That gives us less than 3 hours to prepare. I'll have Marcus bring the necessary equipment. Sophia will coordinate with security. He fixed Eleanor with an intense gaze. Promise me you'll be careful. No unnecessary risks. I promise, she said solemnly. Besides, how dangerous can an upscale steakhouse be? Rob's expression suggested he didn't find her attempt at lightening the mood particularly reassuring. You'd be surprised. Let's get ready. Gibson's Steakhouse hummed with the distinctive energy of Chicago's business elite at play expense accounts opening like blooming flowers. Deals sealed over $200 bottles of wine, power dynamics shifting with each carefully orchestrated seating arrangement. Eleanor sat at the bar, nursing a club soda while maintaining a clear view of the private dining room where Victoria had arrived 20 minutes earlier. The tiny camera disguised as a brooch on her blazer captured everything in its sightline, while the microphone embedded in her watch would activate only when she pressed a specific button, a safety measure to prevent continuous recording of innocent bystanders. In her ear, a nearly invisible communication device kept her connected to Rob and Marcus, who were monitoring from a van parked a block away. 2 security personnel posing as diners were stationed strategically around the restaurant, close enough to intervene if necessary. Montgomery just arrived. Rob's voice came through clearly. Gray suit, red tie, entering from the Michigan Avenue side. Eleanor spotted him immediately, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to getting his way. He was accompanied by a younger man carrying a leather portfolio, who Eleanor guessed was legal counsel or a financial advisor. I see them, she confirmed softly, adjusting her position to ensure the camera had a clear view of the private room when the door opened. They're heading to Victoria's table now. The maitre d' escorted Montgomery and his associate to the private dining room, opening the door just long enough for Eleanor's camera to capture Victoria rising to greet them. The door closed behind them, cutting off visual access. We've lost visual, Marcus reported unnecessarily. Audio might be difficult through the closed door. Can you get any closer? Eleanor surveyed the restaurant layout, noting that the private room had a second entrance from a service corridor, likely for waitstaff to enter without disturbing the main dining room. I'm going to try something, she murmured. Don't panic. Ignoring Rob's immediate protest in her ear, Eleanor slipped from her bar stool and made her way casually toward the restrooms, which she'd noted earlier were located along the same service corridor as the private room's second entrance. Once in the corridor and out of sight of the main dining area, she slowed her pace, listening carefully. A server emerged from the private room, balancing an empty tray. As the door swung shut behind him, Eleanor made her decision. Moving quickly, she positioned herself directly beside the door, pressing her back against the wall as if waiting for someone. From this position, voices from inside carried clearly enough to be picked up by her microphone. She pressed the recording button on her watch and focused on the conversation now audible through the not-quite-soundproof door. Timeline accelerated significantly, Victoria was saying. Sullivan is suspicious, but he lacks concrete evidence of our arrangement. The board meeting tomorrow is premature, Montgomery's deeper voice replied. Global Vision's offer isn't finalized. It needs to happen now, Victoria insisted. He's formed a task force investigating the financial irregularities. They're getting closer to connecting the dots. The North Star campaign launches next week. This from the younger man, his voice precise and lawyerly. Yes, once the inflated efficacy claims go public, The liability exposure will be substantial. That, combined with the quarterly losses I've engineered, will make the Global Vision acquisition appear as a rescue rather than a hostile takeover. Eleanor's heart raced at the explicit admission of guilt. They had her on record now, clearly stating her deliberate sabotage of Horizon in collusion with Global Vision. "And your compensation package is acceptable?" Montgomery asked. COO of the merged media division, with a guaranteed seven-figure bonus structure and stock options as discussed, Victoria confirmed. Plus, of course, the satisfaction of watching Robert lose everything he built. "Your personal vendetta against your ex-husband is not Global Vision's concern," Montgomery said coldly. "We expect professional execution of the transition, not emotional theatrics." "Of course," Victoria agreed smoothly. "Though I should mention there's a potential complication, Eleanor Morgan. Robert has brought her into his confidence, given her access to financial records she shouldn't have seen. She's discovered the North Star data manipulation." Eleanor tensed at the mention of her name, pressing the button on her watch to ensure every word was being recorded. "Is she a threat?" Montgomery asked. "Potentially. She's smarter than I initially gave her credit for. And now she's under Robert's protection, both professionally and personally." "Personally," Montgomery sounded surprised. "That's unlike Sullivan. Apparently late career loneliness has made him vulnerable," Victoria said with evident disdain. "In any case, steps have been taken to neutralize Ms. Morgan's influence. The fire destroyed much of her evidence, and other measures are in place should she become more problematic." The clinical way Victoria discussed potential harm sent a chill through Eleanor. In her ear, Rob's voice was tight with controlled anger. "We've got enough. Get out of there now." Eleanor was about to comply when the service door suddenly opened and a server stepped into the corridor, giving her a curious look. "Can I help you, ma'am?" Before Eleanor could respond, the private dining room door opened as well. Victoria stepped out, apparently heading to the restroom, and came face to face with Eleanor standing directly outside the door. Time seemed to freeze as their eyes met Victoria's, widening first with surprise, then narrowing with dangerous comprehension as she noted the brooch camera in Eleanor's position by the door. "Eleanor," she said, her voice deceptively pleasant. "What an unexpected surprise. Eavesdropping, are we?" "Just waiting for the restroom," Eleanor replied, forcing a casual tone despite her pounding heart. In her ear, Rob was instructing security to move in immediately. "Of course you are," Victoria said, stepping closer. "And that lovely brooch is it new? It looks almost like it might contain a camera." Her hand shot out, grasping Eleanor's wrist where the watch microphone was concealed. "And this watch, I don't recall you wearing such an expensive timepiece before." Eleanor tried to pull away, but Victoria's grip tightened painfully. "You're hurting me, Victoria." "You have no idea what hurt is," Victoria hissed, her carefully maintained facade cracking to reveal the rage beneath. "Do you think Robert actually cares about you? You're a tool, Eleanor, a means to an end, just like I was, just like everyone in his life." "Let go of my arm," Eleanor said firmly, refusing to show fear despite the genuine menace radiating from the other woman. Victoria leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You've recorded our conversation, haven't you? How very clever, but it won't matter. By this time tomorrow, Robert will be finished, Horizon will be mine, and you'll be facing far worse consequences than a bruised wrist. Is everything all right here?" One of the security personnel had approached, his hand casually positioned near where Eleanor knew he carried a concealed weapon. Victoria released Eleanor's wrist immediately, her public smile snapping back into place. "Perfectly fine. Just catching up with a former colleague. If you'll excuse me, I need to return to my dinner guests." As Victoria disappeared back into the private dining room, the security officer guided Eleanor quickly toward the exit. "We need to move now," he said under his breath. "She'll alert Montgomery, and they may have their own security present." They made it outside without incident, moving briskly to the waiting van where Rob and Marcus were monitoring the recording equipment. as soon as Eleanor climbed inside. Rob's relief was palpable. "Are you all right?" he asked, examining her wrist where Victoria's grip had left visible marks. "I'm fine," Eleanor assured him, though adrenaline was still coursing through her system. "Did you get it all?" "The recording," Marcus nodded, removing a memory card from the receiving equipment. "Crystal clear." Victoria explicitly admitted to manipulating financial data, engineering quarterly losses, falsifying the North Star efficacy claims, and colluding with Global Vision. "It's everything we needed and more." Rob's expression was grim as they pulled away from the curb. "She saw the recording equipment. She knows we have evidence against her now, which makes her more dangerous than ever," Eleanor acknowledged. "What's our next move?" "We take this to the board immediately," Rob decided. "Tonight, before Victoria can destroy more evidence or create a counter-narrative." He looked at Eleanor with concern still evident in his eyes. "Are you sure you're up for this? You've already risked more than anyone should have to." Eleanor thought of her destroyed office, of the intruder in her apartment, of Victoria's cold threat just minutes ago. She thought of her mother's journals and the strange connection that had brought her and Rob together at this crucial moment. "I'm sure," she said with quiet determination. "Let's finish this." As the van moved through Chicago's nighttime streets toward Horizon's headquarters, Eleanor felt an unexpected calm settle over her. Whatever happened next, she had found something in the past few days that had been missing from her life for too long: purpose, connection, and the knowledge that she was fighting for something that truly mattered. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she could almost hear her mother's voice from years ago. "Truth is worth the scars." She glanced at Rob, who was speaking intently with Marcus about security protocols for the emergency board meeting, and wondered if he remembered saying those words to a young Army nurse more than 3 decades earlier. Some connections, it seemed, were meant to endure across time and circumstance. Some second chances arrived when you least expected them, in forms you never anticipated. Eleanor's wrist throbbed where Victoria had grabbed her, but her resolve had never been stronger. As they pulled up to Horizon's gleaming tower, she prepared herself for the confrontation to come, and for whatever might lie beyond it. Eleanor stood at the edge of Lake Michigan, watching the morning sun paint gold across the water. Beside her, Rob skipped stones with practiced ease, each one traveling further than the last. Behind them, the guest house had become home, its walls now adorned with her photographs alongside his. Not hiding anymore, either of them. The battle for Horizon had exacted its price. Offices destroyed, reputations challenged, old wounds reopened. Yet from those ashes, something unexpected had emerged: a partnership forged in crisis, deepened through understanding. Two people who had spent decades defining themselves by what they'd lost, now cautiously exploring what might be found. In her pocket, Eleanor carried her mother's medallion, the tarnished bronze connecting 3 lives across time: a young Army nurse, a wounded photographer, and the daughter who completed the circle 30 years later. Some might call it coincidence, others fate. Eleanor preferred to think of it as recognition, souls finding each other across the noise of life, seeing clearly what others miss. We all stand at the shoreline of our own second chances, watching the sun climb into possibility. The question isn't whether we deserve them, it's whether we have the courage to step forward when they arrive, to feel the cool water against our feet, to begin again with the rising light.